Pathra punch!
Hello students, I'm your teacher Pathra, and this is your Crafting 101 class. I know as students you don't have all the dust in the world, and sometimes you just want to go for those good, safe crafts. In today's lesson, we will go over the top legendary cards and discuss why they excel in the current meta. Hopefully by the end of the video you will know exactly what legendary cards you'd like to craft. Let's proceed!
This video is a guide to help new players know what legendaries are currently used a lot competitively and what are safe crafts. The meta is still new, so there is still room to grow for many of the legendaries and decks. You can do whatever you want with your legendary and dust. Pathra has gotten her community to vote for each legendary card, which you will see in the graphs. This helps give you a summary of what a Hearthstone community feel about certain cards.
The first Scholomance legendary I want to talk about is Mind Render Illusia. And my top 10 legendaries are going to be in order of most powerful to least powerful. So as you can see, Mind Render Illusia is at the very top. Priest probably got the best legendary out of the set. Mind Render Illusia has the power to mess up people's game plan, curve, and basically just stops OTK decks from killing you. Priest was a class that used to be afraid of OTK decks, since they're usually slow control or mid-range decks, but with Mind Render Illusia available for them now, that is no longer a problem, and this legendary most likely will be an auto-include in every Priest deck. Next up we have Speaker Gidra. Speaker Gidra is such a good legendary in Druid or Shaman decks that use big spells. It is currently seen more in Druid than Shaman, since Shaman's big spells are AoEs and it could be kinda awkward to play with Gidra. But it really is such a flexible card that you can even just play it as a standalone on turn 3, and if it doesn't die, you can buff it after with a spell. Rush and Wind Fury onto this minion with a possible buff makes Gidra a force to be reckoned with. In third, we have High Abyss Allura. Paladin went from one of the worst classes into a top tier archetype overnight. High Abyss Allura works more for Paladin than it does for Priest, since Paladin has more spells that buff minions than removal spells like Priest does. High Abyss Allura has been seen in buff Libram Pally decks, which run no board clears and removals since it does not work well with the legendary. It's really nice to see Paladin back on the ladder to take down those ramp druids. Next we have Mozaki Master Duelist. Mozaki enables OTK Mage. It is a cheaper and better Malygos since you can increase the spell damage to a huge amount. Most play Mozaki with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices, and some cheap spells increasing the spell damage up to 10 or more. You can also draw a lot of cards with cards like Cram Session, and basically killing your opponent with crazy burst damage. For anyone who enjoys OTK or Exodia style decks, this legendary may be exactly what you are looking for. In fifth, we have Lorekeeper Polkelt. Polkelt is the new Hemet that doesn't destroy your deck, he just rearranges it. He's a neutral, so that makes him fit into a lot of decks for all the classes. People are starting to find some creative builds of combo decks that make use of this card, and it's already seen in a lot of OTK Mage. Some Demon Hunters run this legendary to make sure they find their Skull of Guldans. Polkelt is a powerful card, and we've only scratched the surface of what this card can do so far. You over there! Yes, you. You're making funny faces. Get out. Alright, where were we? Then we have Lord Barav in 6. When you combine cards like Equality and Whirlwind into a minion, you know it's gonna be good. Lord Barav is a cheaper equality to Paladin with a body, and to Warrior it's insane with Skipper for a board clear. He seems to be a bit better fitted into the Warrior more than Paladin, since Tempo Warriors with Skippers will have good synergy with Lord Barav, and Control Warriors will just use him as an AoE board clear. In 7th we have Forest Warden Omu. Omu is a key piece in the new Druid Malygos deck. It has the power to cheat a lot of mana in a single turn. Some abuse this using the card Germination. You can play Omu, Germination on the Omu, making you have 10 mana, you drop the Malygos and play a Moonfire, and that procs the second Omu to give you 10 more mana to burst down some spells. Or you can get a 1 mana Omu or a 1 mana Malygos from Geppetto, and then Germination the Malygos, and yep, you get the picture. With 2 ways to trigger the combo, it makes the deck quite consistent. In 8th, we have Ace Hunter Kreen, which is Hunter Ace's card. This dual class legendary is seen in a lot of aggressive Demon Hunter lists, and is very powerful when you are ahead on board. It can help aggressive minions go through taunts or trade down your opponent's minions without dying and losing your board. It basically allows you to snowball boards pretty hard when you're ahead. You can also include him in Highlander Hunter lists to keep hold of your board. Next is Jandis Barav. Jandis is a pretty good tempo play legendary, but hasn't been seen all that much yet since most of the rogue decks on the ladder are on the aggressive side because they're taking advantage of the new card's Secret Passage. Jandis does suit a more tempo, mid-range style kind of deck for rogue or the mage class. It is currently seen and used in some Highlander mage decks. And in 10th, we have Sociologist Militia. I have seen Sociologist Militia in action, and it is indeed a strong legendary card for Soul Fragment decks. People are still refining Soul Fragment decks though, and it is still unsure how good Soul Fragment decks are compared to some of the other deck archetypes. But because she is such a strong card, she is definitely one we need to keep an eye on. So that's my top 10 competitive legendary list. Here are some other legendaries that just couldn't quite make it to my top 10, but they're pretty good to hold on to if you have them already, or possibly craft them for other deck archetypes. Legendaries like Ras Frost Whisper, Headmaster Kel'Thuzad, Dr. Krastinov, Infiltrator Lillian, Instructor Fireheart, Rattlegore, and Sphere of Sapience are all decent legendaries. If you have any of these, hold on to them. I think they're useful in different deck archetypes. And here are the legendaries that basically lean towards the don't craft side. They just haven't found a home yet. This is Disciplinarian Gandling, Shandu Wildclaw, Vectus, Star Student Selena, Turalian the Tenard, Keymaster Alabaster, Professor Slate, and Archwitch Willow. These guys are the least popular legendaries right now, but it's still early in the meta, maybe they'll find a place later. To help you guys even more, I have called upon other fellow teachers of the Scholomance Academy to give their input on their top 5 competitive Scholomance legendary cards. Gallon's top 5 competitive Scholomance legendaries are, in no specific order, Mindrender Illucia, Speaker Gidra, Lord Barav, Ozaki, Abbess Allura. Avellines are Speaker Gidra, Jandis Barav, Lord Barav, High Abbess Allura, and Mozaki. Orangehs are Mindrender Illucia, Mozaki, Lord Keeper Polkelt, High Abbess Allura, and Speaker Gidra. Tylers are Mindrender Illucia, Mozaki, Lord Barav, Jandis Barav, and Lord Keeper Polkelt. And finally, rduhs top 5 is Mindrender Illucia, Forest Warden Omu, Lord Keeper Polkelt, Jandis Barav, and Mozaki. I do want to say though that the Scholomance Academy legendaries are all so different from each other, and they're like made for different deck archetypes. And whether that deck archetype thrives or not in this meta is dependent on its supporting cards, you know, like the other rares or epics that help support the legendary card. If you're holding on to a legendary card that isn't seeing much play right now, don't worry about it. It's still very early in the meta. People are still creating new decks. There's more expansions to come where your legendary is still sticking around then. And you know what? Your legendary might see play in Wild. Speaking of supporting cards, as a bonus in this class, I'm going to list my top 5 epic Scolomancy cards, just in case you need crafting guidance in that area too. The first epic card I want to feature is Secret Passage. All the rogues, especially aggressive rogues, are using this card right now. The next epic card is Guardian Animals. Ramp druids with Beast in the decks are totally taking advantage of this card. Argent Braggart. Braggart is quite nutty when a druid innervates and cheats out a big minion and you have a 2-mana minion that can contest to it. Or, you know, just copy one of your big buff minions on the board for just 2 mana. Devout Pupil. This card is seeing a lot of play in pure buff paladin lists where it gets pretty cheap after some spells. And lastly, Devolving Missiles. This card is seen a lot in OTK Mage as one of the cheap spells to play with your Sorcerer's Apprentices, and it helps give Mozaki more spell damage. So yep, those are my top 5 epic cards that you could possibly craft. And that, my dear fellow students, is the end of Crafting 101 class. I do hope you learned something in today's lesson. And if you did, please give the video a like, make sure you're subscribed, and I'd like to see you guys again. And as for your homework, comment below and tell me your favorite legendaries from the Scholomance Academy expansion. See you next time. Do you think I make a good teacher? I think I make a good teacher.